Paul Hamilton joining me from the Sunshine State down in Florida, where Kevyn Adams put in the final touches on a busy afternoon and morning, and I'm sure week plus of putting together some of these trades for the Sabres as the deadline coming and going here. I'll just start generally, Paul. The activity by the Sabres, not only trading guys away, but even the extensions here. We'll even throw in Jordan Greenway before today. How surprised are you that they were able, and Adams this able, to do this much?
Well, I've been very critical of Kevyn recently, and I think rightfully so, but I will give him credit. This is the second trade deadline in a row where he has been able to pull off a hockey trade. That is not easy to do, and it's not often done. Last year was Bo Byram. This year, he gets Josh Norris. And I think this is a really good move for both players. I think both players could use a change of scenery. Josh Norris, they're different types of players. I think if they're both playing at their best and healthy, Josh Norris might be a little bit better player, and his salary is even a little bit more by about 800,000. The problem with Josh is he's been hurt a lot. He's had two shoulder surgeries, and he's been had trouble getting through seasons. So he's trying to navigate that, and we've all seen the problems Dylan Cozens has had. I mean, he had that great year with the 31 goals, and it's kind of gone south for him since then. But he's a guy that cares. And he was upset that he got traded from the fact that he desperately wanted to be part of the solution here in Buffalo, not part of the problem. And I think he kind of feels he let people down. And I had a chance to see him in the lobby right before he left, and I wished him well, thanked him because he was always courteous. He was always doing interviews. You never had to worry about Dylan Cozens, and I thanked him for that. And he was rather emotional, that he had to leave. And I totally understood that he didn't want to do an interview at that time. He said, I just can't. And I get it. He was choked up and emotional, and I respected that. But this is the business, and these young players are going to learn the business as they did when Casey Middlestat was traded. They all were close with him too. And the bottom line is something you and I and Adam have talked about many times on Monday. They had to do something different. This plan was not working. This core was not working. Talented hockey players, but they weren't gelling as a group. I like this move. And you know what? Even if it doesn't move, it doesn't work. I think this is a good move for both players, and I think it's a start. Now you've started, you don't have to blow up the whole core, but you have to start moving some of the core out of here and bring in some new pieces. You're in last place in the conference when you should have been in a playoff spot. It's just not working, but you can't stop here. I think it was important. You mentioned the signings to re-sign Greenway and Zucker, but I think a lot more will need to be done. And we had Kevyn Adams for about 35 minutes today, and quite honestly, he lived up to it. He admitted during the 13-game streak, he said, it's bothered me and I've thought about it a lot. Could I or should I done things differently or done things more? So it's something that's keeping him up at night. The way he handled that should have been done differently or shouldn't have. What could he do differently? This team is not where it should be. And he said that falls on him. So now what does he do to change his plan that he's been trying to do? He's going to have to do that differently. I asked him about the guys in Rochester, making sure maybe they develop more, not rushing them up. And he owned up to a lot of those things, that he has to do things differently. And he said Terry Pagula is holding him accountable, just like he's holding his players accountable. And we talked about what happened with Tage Thompson, and there was no response. He was upset about that. He goes, that has to change. He said, what I will tell you, he goes, a lot of that we're going to keep in the room. But he said, well, I will tell you is I told them they have to have a pack mentality. That can never happen again. You have to be in it together, willing to go after it together. And if something like that happens, you all have to be in there. And he said he was very emphatic about that with the team. He knows they have to be tougher. He knows they have to be harder to play against. He tried doing that in the offseason, but it didn't go far enough. And so he understands, and he took a lot of I want to say grief that he thinks he deserves on it, and he knows that he has to do better.
It's interesting. Maybe the very last image of Dylan Cozens' time with the Sabres is Rasmus Dahlin getting mauled by seemingly the entire team, and Cozens is off to the side, a little, I don't want to say hesitant because that's insinuating he didn't want to get in, but he wasn't in the pack. And that
He
was a
got there
picture.
later, but much later.
Correct. And just to be clear, that is not why Dylan Cozens was traded by the Sabres a day later, but it just goes to show that part of the reason and what they're looking for and shipping it out here. I want to talk about Adams, and then we can get more into the specific trades. I listened to most of it from afar. You were there in Florida. To me, while I agree he seemed to take accountability, a lot of the answers I feel like I've heard before from him in terms of we have to be better. It's not a lack of trying. People aren't giving up. What, from your sense of being there in person and being around Kevyn more than I have, more than most of us have over his entire tenure, what, if anything, was different this time around in terms of his comments?
I think there were a couple things. Yes, he did talk about, asking players, do they want to be here, and testing them if they really do want to be there. That's the same. But the plan that he put forward, I think, is now different. He's realizing it just didn't work. And that's, locking up the core, maybe too early. Not maybe, yes, too early. And giving them long-term deals with a lot of money. He wasn't the only one doing that. Ottawa was doing it. A lot of other teams were doing it, but then he stopped doing it. He didn't give Peterka one. He didn't give Quinn one. He didn't give Byram one, he could have done that in this last off season, maybe learning his lesson, knowing that, all right, we have to be different how we're doing this. We have to, all right, say to ourselves, this isn't right. This team isn't built correctly, and we have to fix it. And that's where I think it's different. He's not like pounding his fist. Well, we just have to be patient. We've heard that a lot. We didn't hear that today. We didn't hear the word patient. We heard the word, he said, yes, we have to make the changes necessary to make this into a good team and a playoff team. And, that's the difference in the plan. Some of the guys who are the core that like Dylan Cozens, that they put a lot of money into, are not going to be here for it. By the way, he did say the Peterka stuff yesterday just wasn't true. He said they were not close to moving Peterka at the time. It doesn't
Thank
mean they
good.
never will, but still. So that's, I think, because you look at it, it's like, all right, you re-sign Zucker, you re-sign Greenway. Where are you making the changes that you basically have your team back? Well, no, you don't. It's right in those youngsters, the core, and don't be rushing up those guys from Rochester. Do it like Kulik did, where Kulik played over 100 games in the American Hockey League. Don't touch those guys. They're in first place right now going into their game. Let them figure it out this year and maybe even next year, except for Devin Levi, who now is in his second year down there. But don't rush them up here just because you're changing out some of the core. Some of those guys need to be veterans, and I think he's finally starting to realize that all right, you've replaced a guy. Now you maybe have to bring in a veteran player more than just Tuck and Zucker, and Greenway. You have to add to that to help them, show them the way. Too many young players, too many players that I don't think spend enough time in the minors to really learn their craft. And those are the different things that I heard, and that he's going to do different. Before, I was just like, well, I think we're going to be fine. We'll let them play through it. We believe in them. We believe in who they are. And now he's looking at it. We should be in the playoffs right now. And he says that starts with me, and we're not. And now he's realizing that, I think, hey, this core that we locked up isn't all bad, but it's not working together as a team, and it must be changed.
And he also made it clear that conversations that were had now very well can continue into the summer, even if deals did not get done. So maybe this is just the beginning. He gets some things done. But much like we've even seen Brandon Beane with the Bills, communication, it's not always a point A to point B to get the trade done. Sometimes it's a long process here. And I think you probably agree. This is what I thought, which is why I was almost impressed more by what he was able to do today, that the more seismic movement that this roster maybe needs, those types of transactions usually come in the summer and not at the trade deadline.
And he has to stay on it. If this is the only trade, they're not going to be any different than they were last year. And it can't be. They have to keep on it. Obey Cabell didn't work out. He's gone. He was traded today. So there's a spot there where you can add to your team. You just have to keep going. It can't be just one move and, well, the other guys will catch on. I think he's finally starting to realize that hey, it's not the way it should be right now. They should be in a different spot. They're not. It's his fault. He has to fix it, and he has to fix it now. He doesn't have 5 years. He doesn't have 3 years. They said at the start of the season, the time is now. The time is now. And if he's going to remain the general manager, and I asked him, I said, you've talked about tough conversations that you're having with your players. I said, is Terry Pegula having tough conversations with you? And he said, yes. He said, he goes, I have to own up to my mistakes with Terry Pegula, and I have. And he says, not only do you own up to it, you have to have a solution. All right, what are you going to do about it? And that's the conversations they've had being down here. Of course, Terry lives down here, so he's been in conversations with Kevyn Adams and his staff. Kevin's staff is all down here. Those are the conversations that Pegula is having too. So if he's going to keep Adams as the general manager, things have to change, and they have to keep changing.
A big key in this change is Norris. You already mentioned off the top, injuries have really been the issue here. I was looking at his game logs here. 6 years in the league. First year he played like a handful of games. It doesn't really count. 66 games is the most games he's ever played. Everything else, it's between 50 and 55. He's at $8 million. When he played his most games, the numbers were all similar to Dylan Cozens here. So what sort of a change do you believe, and where does he slot currently and maybe down the line with this Sabres team?
Well, he, like Dylan Cozens, has 130-goal year, but he also hasn't played enough games to get to 30 goals in other seasons. The worry is his shoulder. He's had 2 shoulder surgeries. I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of those years he only played 8 games.
Correct, yeah.
So he's had 2 shoulder surgeries. That, of course, is a worry. But when he's right and he's healthy and playing, I think he's going to be a good player. He brings something that others don't. He can win draws for you. He can play specialty teams, whether it's penalty kill or on the power play. And it's just something different for them. Because, a year ago, before the Middlestat trade, the conversation was, well, who's the number 2 center? Is it Cozens or Middlestat? And then the other guy might slot in as your number 3 center. Well, neither one of them are here anymore. So it's looking like maybe your centers will be Josh and Kulik if you keep Thompson over on the wing. I don't know if that's what they're going to do. I haven't hated it, to be quite honest with you. But, at least they have options now when it comes to that. Kulik, I do hate on the wing. I think Kulik is a much better center than he is a wing. And when he gets over on the wing, you just don't notice him as much. So because of his skating and his playmaking ability and getting up into the play. So again, to summarize, you need more guys like Kulik developed. Don't be in a rush to see Helenius. Don't be in a rush to see the youngsters down there, the 2 Russian defensemen that people are excited about. Let them be down there. Ostlund, who is red hot right now with the Amerks, he's also number 1 pick for the Sabres. Let them develop. Let's do it right this time. Let's not run them up here after 45 games in Rochester because they scored a bunch of goals and then plug them in. And then you got 8 of those guys and not enough of the other veteran guys. You've made the mistakes, learn from the mistakes, but you have to fix it quickly. You don't have 3 years. It's been 14. Adams has had 5. That is more than enough time. If Terry Pegula is going to keep him here, it has to be done quickly.
You mentioned some of these younger guys. You mentioned Peterka, not actually on the trading block, which I thought even the rumor itself, I mean, the idea of it was idiotic here. He's an RFA. Adams touched on that, did he not?
Yeah, and you have to look at it. The thing is, were there conversations about Paterka at some point? Probably. I think teams were calling out a lot of the Sabre players. The way Adams, I don't, I have, my information tells me Adams was never shopping Dylan Cozens, but he had a lot of calls. And Adams does this, and I agree 100% with this. If somebody calls, okay, what are you offering? He has the conversation. He wants to know his players' worth around the NHL. What are people willing to pay for his players? Is somebody going to blow him out of the water? Alex Tuck's name was out there. Not because Adams was shopping him, because somebody called on Alex Tuck. So it gets out there. Well, I think it'd be ridiculous to trade Alex Tuck. You're looking for veteran leadership. What does Alex Tuck bring? He's a good top six guy who has veteran leadership, who brings value to you. But what if somebody offers some ridiculous? What if somebody offered Connor McDavid? Now that's not going to happen. But I'm trying to be ridiculous here. What if some GM just comes up with an offer like you're like, what? Okay, type of a trade. So you always want to listen and have the conversation. Then all of a sudden, something may happen that you do like. But I don't think he was looking to trade Dylan Cozens when all these people were calling. But this was a deal. He could get Josh Norris. He gave up a second round pick. People were asking about that. Who cares? Did they have enough prospects and everything? So they had to put in a second round pick. I think it's going to hurt they don't have Gilbert, because you talk about being harder to play against and guys who are in the fray. Gilbert's one of the only ones that is. But Ottawa realized that too. They want to take some of this fighting off Brady Tkachuk. So they wanted Gilbert for those reasons. So you had to bite the bullet and do that. I bet Kevyn Adams probably didn't want to, since he's the guy that you throw out there if there is trouble. But they knew that he knew he had to make changes. He knew this was a good opportunity to make changes. If you had to add Gilbert and you had to add a second round pick, so be it.
I agree. Let's just Jacob Bernard Docker, and then in the Obey Kubel trade, Eric Brandstrom. What
This is
sort
the
of an,
third time Branstom's been traded this year.
I
He
mean,
was traded
what,
in October, and he was traded at the end of December too. So these are depth guys that you're looking at, that they also got from Ottawa. This is a guy that is going to be between Rochester and Buffalo, a 7 or 8 type of defenseman. That's really what you were looking at, maybe to help the Amherst if they have to help their playoff run. Not really, I think, somebody that they were looking at long term that's going to be in the lineup for Buffalo. So they're going to have work to do on the defense, because you don't have Yoki Haru anymore. You don't have Gilbert anymore. You had 8D, now you're down to 6. Now you can bring up Johnson if you want to from Rochester, who I've heard conflicting things, that he's doing very well. I've also heard he's not doing very well. So you see what you're going to get out of that. But it just goes to show you. And I'll share something Craig Rivet said to me on his podcast, which I really think is valid here. He goes, for Owen Power, and Craig goes, I know this because he had to do that for Markov with the Canadians. He goes, Owen Power needs a guy to come here, a veteran guy who comes in and is going to be his partner. And on the first day, he goes up to Owen Power and says, I got you. You have nothing to worry about on the ice. If things get out of control, I'll take care of it. Don't you worry about it. You go out and you play your game. And we're going to play every game together. We're going to do this together. We're going to talk. And I've got your back. And I thought to myself, I think he's right. I think that is what Owen Power needs, to have a partner like that. And Craig Rivet would know, as I said, he did that with the Montreal Canadiens. So, when he had their star defenseman at the time who needed help. So that's maybe the type of guy they should be looking for, that can pair with Owen Power and make him into the player the Sabres thought they were getting when they drafted him.
and this is just an aside. If Bowen Byram is best suited to play with Rasmus Dahlin, and that is you finally seem to find a partner, I don't really understand why Lindy is taking him away because he's not nearly the player that he is when he's not next to Darlene. That's an aside, Paul.
But I
We can
get
get
it. I don't think he would do it if they were in a playoff run. I think they've seen him with Darlene for a couple months. Now let him put him back with some other guys and see if he can continue that play with some of the other guys. I think it's a just let's see what it looks like type of a deal. If they were in a playoff race, I would doubt he would have done it.
what this will be the last one. What do today's moves do for the room, the roster, that the guys that are still here the rest of the way
I
this
think
season? This
for
season.
the yeah, for the room, they're disappointed that they lost Dylan Cozens. But some of these youngsters have to realize you're going to lose your friends on the team. They're still going to be your friends, but on the team. And understand that it's going to happen again. This isn't the last time they're going to lose somebody out of that room that they really, really enjoy being around. And realize as players, you're part of the reason why that player isn't here anymore because you're not playing well enough. And if you guys go out and play to your potential and play well enough, you're not going to be losing friends because you're going to be a good hockey team. And so I think this is, what these players have to learn and have to figure out that this is part of and they'll get over it. They always do. They got over Casey Middlestat, who was a very well-liked player, and they'll get over this too. And then Josh Norris will come in. And from everything I've heard, he's a good guy, and they'll get to know him. And, Casey Middlestat left, and Bo Byram now is a big part of that room. He's a well-liked person in that room now. That's the way hockey goes. And these youngsters have to realize that. So they'll be fine. They'll figure it out. And they'll figure out that this is a business. And if you don't want it to happen, be a better team.
And we'll see if that begins with Josh Norris, some guys in, some guys out, some guys staying. Like I said, did you catch your breath yet, Paul? It was a busy 24 hours.
Nope, nope, not yet, because I've been doing a lot of video, a lot of radio, and now I got to.
Okay. All right, Paul. Thank you for doing this. Enjoy Florida. And we will be close but far away this time tomorrow.
I'll be looking forward to it. Take care.
All right, bye.